Episode 3, Chapter 1. Morẹ sat on the small wooden bench outside Mama Kemi's shop, watching the bustling street of Mushin unfold before her. It had been months since she fled Abakwa, leaving behind the pain, the persecution, and the weight of Baba Luku's wrath. But now, things had changed. Damilo's words still echoed in her mind. Baba Luku has been removed. Abakwa is no longer under his chains. You can come home, Morẹ. Home. The word felt distant, almost foreign now. Lagos had become a strange kind of refuge. The days had been hard, but she had found strength in the small church where she first met Mama Kemi. Working in the buka, she learned to survive, to endure, and to pray even when her faith wavered. Her mother, now living with her, had started to heal. The deep scar Baba Luku left in their lives was still there, but the love and kindness of Mama Kemi had been a balm to their wounded souls. But Damilola's news had shaken everything. Amot me, what are you thinking about? Mama Kemi's voice broke into her thoughts. The older woman, strong and round-faced, walked up to her, wiping her hands on her apron. Morẹ sighed. Mum, I don't know if I can go back. Mama Kemi sat beside her and patted her shoulder. Is it fear or is it something else? Fear, she admitted, and doubt. I left Abakwa broken, chased like a criminal for my faith. How do I return just because Baba Luku is gone? What if his spirit still lingers? What if another man like him rises? What if... Mama Kemi chuckled, shaking her head. You think too much, my dear. If God has opened the door, why are you hesitating? Maybe because I don't know if it is truly God opening it or just my past trying to haunt me again. Mama Kemi exhaled and stood. Pray. That is all I will tell you. Pray. If God wants you in Abakwa, he will make it clear. Morẹ nodded, but deep down she feared that praying would only make the decision harder. That evening, as she washed the buka's large pots, Damilo arrived. She didn't have to look up to know it was him. His presence was distinct, strong, confident, but never overwhelming. She had come to recognize his footsteps, the gentle way he said her name, the way his voice always carried something unspoken beneath the words. You're thinking about it, he said as he leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. She sighed. I don't know what to do, Damilo. He walked closer, careful not to step on the soapy water near her feet. Abakwa is different now, Morẹ. The people, they need hope. They need someone like you. She shook her head. What do I have to offer them? His eyes softened. You have more than you know. Your faith, your resilience. You are living proof that darkness does not last forever. Your story alone can heal. She turned to face him fully. And you? Will you return too? A flicker of hesitation crossed his face, but it passed quickly. I don't know. Lagos has become home for me too. But he trailed off, his gaze locking onto hers. If you go, maybe I will too. Something stirred in her chest, something she had refused to acknowledge for months. They stood in silence, the weight of unspoken words pressing between them. Then he smiled. February 12th is in 2 days. Maybe you'll have an answer by then. Morẹ watched him walk away, his words lingering in the cool night air. She wasn't sure yet, but she had a feeling that this decision was going to change everything. Episode 3, Chapter 2. The night was restless. Sleep eluded Morẹ as she lay on the thin mattress she shared with her mother in Mama Kemi's small apartment. The air was thick with unanswered questions, and no matter how tightly she shut her eyes, her mind refused to be silent. Fuck! She could still hear the whispers of the villagers, the murmured prayers of the few who had dared to stand with her. She could still feel the sting of betrayal when those she thought were her people turned against her, casting her out because of her faith. And yet, it was home. A deep sigh escaped her lips as she turned to her side. Her mother was fast asleep, her breath slow and steady. The months in Lagos had aged her, but at least she no longer carried the fear that had once darkened her eyes. Here she was safe. They both were. So why was she even considering going back? The next morning the buka was alive with the usual chaos. Women shouted orders, men banged their spoons against metal plates, and the thick aroma of pepper soup filled the air. Morẹ moved mechanically, serving customers, wiping tables, and ignoring the questions screaming in her mind. Morẹ! She turned at the sound of her name and found Mama Kemi waving her over. Someone is here to see you. Wiping her hands on her wrapper, she stepped outside, only to stop short when she saw a tall, well-dressed man standing near the entrance. His dark eyes twinkled with confidence, and his smile was warm, almost too perfect. "Morẹ, níkẹ, right?" His voice was smooth, practiced. "My name is Coyote." She hesitated, glancing at Mama Kemi, who gave her an encouraging nod. "Yes, I'm Morẹ, níkẹ." "Do I know you?" Coyote chuckled. "Not yet, but I've heard a lot about you." "From who?" "Damilala." Her heart skipped. "Damila?" "I work in his company. When he told me about you, I had to come meet you myself." He paused, studying her. "You see, I run a foundation that supports women who've had to start over, just like you. We offer housing, jobs, even scholarships. I wanted to personally invite you to be part of it." Morẹ blinked. "I don't understand." "You don't have to go back to Bakor," he said, his voice soft. "You can build a new life here, a better one." Her throat went dry. "You deserve more than struggling in her," Coyote continued, stepping closer. "Let me help you." There it was, the temptation. A new life. A fresh start. No running, no more pain, no more past haunting her steps. She didn't realize she had been holding her breath until Mama Kemi placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "My dear," Mama Kemi said slowly, "a good offer does not always mean a God-given offer." Coyote smiled, unfazed. "I understand your hesitation, but think about it, Morẹ níkẹ. You have until February 12th to decide." And with that, he handed her a card and walked away, leaving her standing there, her heart pounding. Behind her, Mama Kemi exhaled. Morẹ níkẹ turned to her, confusion written all over her face. "Mama, what do I do?" Mama Kemi gave her a knowing look. "You already know the answer, but your heart is fighting it." Morẹ níkẹ gripped the card tightly. 2 days. She had 2 days to decide. Episode 3! The sun dipped a little low over Lagos, casting a golden glow over the busy streets. Morẹ sat outside Mama Kemi's apartment, the small card from Coyote resting in her palm. The words blurred before her eyes as doubt warred with faith. A fresh start, a new life. No more struggles. Her heart pounded with uncertainty. Why was this so difficult? Wasn't this what she had wanted when she first fled to Lagos? A chance to rebuild? She closed her eyes and exhaled. Then she prayed. "Lord, show me your will. I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to move outside your plan." But no answer came. Instead, a memory surfaced, one from her first night in Lagos. She had been tired, broken, and alone, wandering the streets until she found herself in a tiny church. The choir had been singing softly, their voices blending in harmony as she had collapsed onto a wooden bench at the back. That was where she had met Mama Kemi. "Come home with me, my dear," the woman had said, no questions asked. Morẹ níkẹ had found refuge in that kindness, and now another door was opening. But was it from God? A knock on the door startled her out of her thoughts. Mama Kemi, who had been inside cooking, poked her head out. "Go and check, my dear." Morẹ níkẹ stood and went to the door, heart pounding. Damila. She froze. He looked different tonight, tired, perhaps. His usual bright smile was absent, replaced by something more serious. "Can we talk?" he asked. She nodded and stepped outside, her fingers tightening around the card still in her hand. For a long moment he said nothing, just studying her as if searching for answers in her face. Then, finally, he sighed. "You're considering it, aren't you?" She swallowed. "Damila?" He shook his head. "I'm not here to convince you. I just need you to know that I believe in you, Morẹ níkẹ. Not because of where you are, but because of who you are." Something in his tone made her chest tighten. "What are you saying?" He ran a hand over his face. "I know what it means to run from pain, to leave behind everything that reminds you of suffering." He exhaled. "But I also know that sometimes God calls us back to the very place we ran from, to change it." Bakot. Her mind flashed back to the village she had once called home, the people, the prayers, the fear. "Things are different now," he continued. "Baba Luku is gone. The people need someone like you, someone with faith." A lump formed in her throat. "What if I'm not strong enough?" His gaze softened. "Then let God be strong for you." Tears burned in her eyes, and for a moment the weight of everything threatened to crush her. Then, slowly, she lifted the card in her hand. "And what if I take this offer?" Damila's jaw tightened. "Then I'll support you, no matter what." Her breath caught. "But," he added, his voice lower now, "I need you to ask yourself something. Are you choosing this because it's easy? Or because it's God's will?" Her fingers trembled around the card. "I She couldn't answer. Damalola nodded, as if he already knew. "I'll be here," he said gently, "no matter what you decide." Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving Morẹ standing in the cool Lagos night, torn between two futures. And for the first time, she was terrified of making the wrong choice. Episode 3, chapter February 12th, faded into the darkness of Lagos. But Morẹ's mind refused to rest. Sleep evaded her, tangled in the web of choices before her, the tempting offer from Kayode, the call to return to Abakwa. Damilola's words echoed in her heart, a whisper of truth she wasn't ready to face. Are you choosing this because it's easy, or because it's God's will? She rolled onto her side, staring at the small flickering candle in the room she shared with Mama Kemi's daughter. Kemi was fast asleep, her soft breathing the only sound breaking the silence. Morẹ exhaled and sat up, wrapping her arms around her knees. Lord, I need an answer. As if on cue, the wind outside howled, rattling the window. A shiver ran down her spine. She reached for her Bible and opened it, her fingers trembling. Her eyes landed on a verse, Isaiah 30:21. Whether you turn to the right or to the left, your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, "This is the way, walk in it." Tears welled up in her eyes. Then speak to me, Lord. Show me the way. A knock on the door startled her. Who could it be at this hour? She tiptoed to the front door, careful not to wake Mama Kemi. Slowly, she opened it just a crack, Kayode. Her heart leaped into her throat. Kayode, she whispered, barely able to believe her eyes. He smiled, the dim light casting sharp angles on his face. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd check on you. At this hour? She hesitated but stepped outside, closing the door gently behind her. Is everything okay? More than okay, he said smoothly. I came to see if you've made a decision. The card in her pocket felt like it was burning a hole through her skin. I don't know yet, she admitted. Kayode studied her for a moment, then chuckled. You're still thinking about that village, aren't you? Morẹ stiffened. He sighed. Morẹ, be honest. What's really waiting for you back there? Struggle, judgment, maybe even danger. His voice was gentle, persuasive. Or you can stay here, build a future, have comforts. Her breath caught as he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. A velvet box. The air left her lungs. He opened it. A gold ring. Not an engagement ring. No, it wasn't that direct. But it was a promise, a future. Say yes, Morẹ, he said, his voice almost a whisper. You don't have to go back. You don't have to suffer anymore. Everything in her wanted to say yes, to choose the easy way. But something deep inside her stirred, something stronger than fear. Damilola's voice whispered in her memory. Then let God be strong for you. Morẹ swallowed, staring at the ring. It was coming, one way or another. But she only had 2 days left to make it. Episode 3, Chapter 5. The night felt heavier than usual. The moment Kayode left, Morẹ sat on the edge of the small bed, staring at the unopened velvet box in her hands. It wasn't an engagement ring, but it felt just as binding. It represented a future of stability comfort, and yet an unsettling emptiness clawed at her chest. What am I doing? She murmured, pressing a hand to her forehead. She placed the box on the wooden table beside her and lay down, hoping sleep would silence the storm in her mind. But when it finally came, it wasn't peaceful. She was standing in Abakwa. The village was different, darker, as though a shadow had fallen over it. The huts, the trees, even the familiar footpaths seemed distorted. A thick fog covered the land, and from within it, distant voices echoed, crying, wailing. Then she saw him, Babaluku. He stood in the centre of the village square, his face twisted in a mixture of rage and agony. But there was something strange. His hands were chained. He was no longer the powerful man who had terrorized her. He was defeated, yet his eyes burned with fury. You cannot escape destiny, his voice boomed. Morẹ took a step back. Suddenly, the fog parted and another figure emerged. It was a woman. Morẹ gasped. It was her mother. Mama! Her voice was barely a whisper. Her mother smiled, but there was sorrow in her eyes. She lifted a hand and pointed behind Morẹ. Morẹ turned. There, standing at the entrance of the village, was herself. But it wasn't the same Morẹ who had fled Abakwa. This version of her stood tall, dressed in a flowing white garment that shimmered like starlight. Her face was radiant, her eyes filled with something Morẹ couldn't quite name. Who are you? Morẹ whispered. The other her smiled. I am who you were meant to be. Morẹ's heart pounded. But if you choose wrong, her mother's voice came again, softer this time, you will never become her. A sudden wind swept through the village. The chains around Baba Luku rattled, his laughter echoing in the night. Morẹ turned back to him, fear gripping her heart. You think you've won? His eyes locked onto hers. You will never be free! The ground beneath her cracked. She screamed. And then she woke up. Sweat covered her skin as she bolted upright in bed, her breath coming in sharp gasps. It was just a dream, but it didn't feel like just a dream. Her hands trembled as she reached for her Bible. She flipped through the pages blindly until her eyes landed on a passage. Proverbs 3:6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. Tears filled her eyes. She couldn't ignore the signs anymore. God was speaking, and now she had no choice but to listen. February 13th had begun, and her moment of truth was drawing closer. Episode 3, Chapter 6. February 13th dawned with a strange stillness in the air. Morẹ had barely slept after the dream, and when she finally got up, a heavy weight pressed on her chest. She needed clarity. She needed answers. Mama Kemi noticed immediately. Omotmi, what is wrong? Asked as she set a steaming bowl of oji and akara before her. Morẹ hesitated. How could she explain the storm raging within her? The dream. The strange vision of herself, the warning. Mama, I don't know what to do, she admitted, stirring her absent-mindedly. Mama Kemi sat down beside her, adjusting her wrapper. About what? Bakot. Morẹ's voice wavered. Damilola says it is safe now. Baba Luku has been overthrown, but, she bit her lip, Coyote has offered me a different future here in Lagos, a stable one. No fear, no pain. Mama Kemi's sharp eyes softened. And what does your heart say? Morẹ exhaled shakily. I don't know. I had a dream last night. My mother was there. And there was another version of me. One that seemed stronger, different. She told me I was meant to be her, but only if I made the right choice. Mama Kemi was silent for a long moment. Then she took Morẹ's hands in hers. God never leaves his children confused. The enemy, however, will always try to bring doubt. Have you prayed? Morẹ looked down. Not enough. Then that is what you must do today. That afternoon, Morẹ locked herself in her small room and fell to her knees. Lord, I am lost. I don't know which path to take. Show me, please. Tears streamed down her face as she poured out her heart. Then a verse floated into her mind. Isaiah 30. Whether you turn to the right or to the left, your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it. Her breath hitched. Was that his answer? Just then, a knock sounded on the door. Come in, she called, wiping her face quickly. It was Damilola. He stepped inside hesitantly, his expression unreadable. Are you okay? Morẹ nodded, though she didn't feel okay at all. I need to tell you something, he said, sitting down. He looked nervous. I know this is a big decision for you, and I don't want to influence you unfairly, but I have to be honest. Morẹ sat up straighter. He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Morẹ, I love you. Silence. Her heart slammed against her ribs. I have loved you since we were children, he continued, his voice raw with emotion. But when everything happened, I didn't know how to say it. I was afraid I would lose you forever. Now I don't want to let fear hold me back anymore. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I don't want you to stay in Lagos because it's easier, Damilola continued. And I don't want you to come back to Bakot just because of me. But I do want you to know if you choose to return, you won't be alone. A lump formed in her throat. Please, just pray about it, he added softly. Then he stood and walked out, leaving her trembling. She pressed a hand to her chest, trying to calm her racing heartbeat. This was too much at once. Coyote's offer, Damilola's confession, her dream. What was she supposed to do? That night, she cried herself to sleep, begging God for one final sign. Tomorrow was February 14th, the day of love, the day she had to decide. Episode 3, the final sign. The early morning air felt different, heavier. Morẹ woke up with a pounding heart, still reeling from the events of the previous day. The weight of her decision pressed against her chest. She lay still for a long time, staring at the ceiling. Today was Valentine's Day, a day of love. But for her, it was a day of decision. Was she going to stay in Lagos with Kayode, where comfort and security awaited her, or was she going to return to Obako, a place filled with painful memories, yet also, perhaps, her true purpose? And then there was Damola. His confession yesterday had unsettled her. She had never allowed herself to dream of love, not after everything she had suffered. But his words lingered, wrapping around her heart like a whisper of hope. She needed an answer, a clear, undeniable answer from God. So she did the only thing she knew how to do. She prayed. She knelt beside her bed, closed her eyes and whispered, "Lord, I need you. If you want me to go back, show me. If I should stay, give me peace about it. But I won't move without you." She stayed in that position for what felt like hours, waiting, listening. And then something happened. A warmth like a gentle embrace filled the room. And she heard it, a voice, soft yet unmistakable. "You are meant to return. Your purpose awaits in Bakwa." Tears streamed down her face as she gasped. That was it, her answer. Her heart no longer felt burdened. She knew what she had to do. Later that morning, she found Mama Kemi sitting outside peeling yams. Morenket swallowed the lump in her throat and sat beside her. "Mama, I'm going back to Abako." Mama Kemi didn't look surprised. Instead, she gave a knowing smile and nodded. "I knew you would, Omami. The hand of God is upon you." Tears pricked Morenet's eyes. "I don't know what awaits me there, but I know I must go." Mama Kemi placed a gentle hand on hers. "Faith, my dear, that is all you need." A twist of fate. Just as Morenke was preparing to pack her things, a knock came at the door. She opened it to find Kayode standing there, looking troubled. "Kayode?" she said, surprised. He exhaled sharply. "Morenke, I need to talk to you." She stepped aside, letting him in. He ran a hand over his face. "Look, I know I put you in a difficult position, offering you a life here when you're still deciding what to do, but there's something you don't know," she frowned. "What is it?" His jaw tightened. "The business I told you about, the boutique, it's not mine." Her breath hitched. "What?" "It belongs to someone else, someone I owe a debt to." He sighed. "I was desperate to make you stay, so I made it seem like I had everything together. But the truth is, I'm drowning in debt. If you stayed with me, I would have dragged you into my mess." Morenik felt her stomach drop. Kayode had lied to her. The offer of security, of stability, it had all been an illusion. She shook her head slowly. "Kayode, why didn't you just tell me the truth?" "Because I was afraid," he admitted. "I wanted to be enough for you." Her heart clenched at his words, but the final piece of the puzzle had clicked into place. Her path was clear. "I'm sorry, Kayode," she said gently, "but I can't stay." His shoulders slumped. "I figured as much." For a long moment they just stood there. Then he forced a smile. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Morenke." And with that, he left. She let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. The test was over, and she had chosen right.
The journey back.
As she packed her few belongings, she felt something shift in her spirit. A weight had lifted. When she stepped outside, she found Damilola waiting for her. "You've made your decision," he said softly. She nodded. "I have." His smile was radiant. "Then let's go home." As they set off for Obako, Morenike felt peace settle deep within her. She didn't know what awaited her. She didn't know what challenges she would face. But she did know this. She was exactly where God wanted her to be. Episode 3, Chapter 8. The journey back to Obako was both familiar and foreign. As the bus rumbled down the highway, Morenike stared out the window, watching the landscape shift from the busy, chaotic streets of Lagos to the quieter, more rural paths leading to her village. It had been over a year since she had last seen Obako. A year of pain, a year of running, a year of searching for something, herself, her faith, her purpose. And now she was returning. Damila sat beside her, quiet but attentive. Every now and then their eyes met and he would offer her a reassuring smile. She appreciated it more than she could say. But despite the peace she had felt when making her decision, a seed of fear still lingered in her heart. Would Bacot welcome her back? Would she ever truly be free of her past? She closed her eyes and whispered a silent prayer. "Lord, I trust you, but please go ahead of me."
Arrival!
The moment she stepped off the bus, a strange hush fell over the villagers who had gathered at the small market square. Morenket could feel the weight of their stares. Whispers travelled from one mouth to another like wildfire. "She's back? Morenket has returned?" Some faces showed shock. Others were filled with curiosity. A few held traces of resentment. But there was something different about Ubakot now. The fear that had once clouded the village had lifted. The people no longer walked around with bowed heads, whispering in secret. There was a sense of freedom, of new beginnings. Even the air smelled different. Demilola stepped beside her. Bakot has changed, Morẹ, níkẹ, but some wounds take time to heal. She nodded, gripping the small bag in her hands. She wasn't here to impress anyone. She had returned to face her destiny. But where did she even begin? Her family home was gone, burnt to the ground. Her mother and siblings were safe in Lagos, living under Mama Kemi's roof. There was no house to return to, no warm embrace waiting for her. Just a land that held both pain and purpose. A land that once rejected her. Would it accept her now? That evening a gathering was called at the village square. The elders had heard of her return. Pa Ojot, the new leader, sat in the centre of the gathering. His eyes were kind but serious. Morẹ, níkẹ, he said, his voice carrying across the square. Ubakot has been through much since you left, but we are rebuilding, we are trying to heal. She swallowed hard. I am not here to stir trouble, Baba. I only came because I needed to. Pa Ojot nodded. And what do you seek? Morẹ, níkẹ hesitated. The answer sat heavy on her chest. Purpose! Closure! A reason to stay! A reason to leave. I don't know yet, she admitted, but I know my journey is not finished here. There was a murmur among the elders. Some still saw her as the girl who had once been accused of bringing a curse upon the land, but the weight of Baba Luku's lies had faded. Finally Pa Ojot spoke. You are welcome to stay, if that is what your heart desires. But know this, Ubakot still has enemies. Not everyone celebrates its freedom, and not everyone has forgotten the past. Morẹ, níkẹ nodded. I understand. But deep inside, she wondered, had she truly escaped the past, or had she walked right back into its grasp? That night, unable to sleep, Morẹ, níkẹ walked to the quiet edge of the village. The stars above burned brightly, scattered across the sky like diamonds. She wrapped her arms around herself, taking in the silence. Then, from the shadows, a voice spoke. You have returned! She turned sharply. Standing before her was Mama Agba, the oldest and most revered prophetess in the village. Morẹ, níkẹ's heart pounded. Mama Agba? The old woman stepped forward, her gaze deep and knowing. There is a prophecy about you, child. Morẹ, níkẹ swallowed hard. You were never meant to remain in exile. Your destiny is tied to this land. You will be the bridge between the past and the future, the one to bring true healing to Bakok. Morẹ, níkẹ's breath hitched. But how? Mama Agba's voice softened. You will know soon enough. Then her expression darkened. But be warned, before healing comes, the past must be confronted, and the past is not yet finished with you. A chill ran down Morẹ, níkẹ's spine. What did that mean? Had she truly escaped Babaluku's shadow, or was something darker waiting just ahead? As the wind whispered through the trees, she realized one thing. Her journey was far from over, and the biggest battle was yet to come. The night was thick with silence, but Morẹ, níkẹ's mind roared with questions. Mama Agba's prophecy lingered in her heart, heavy like a stone. The past is not yet finished with you. She lay on the small cot in the hut where she was staying, staring at the thatched ceiling. Sleep refused to come. Then a voice, soft, gentle, but powerful. She gasped, sitting up, her breath caught in her throat. The voice wasn't coming from outside. It was inside her. A warmth spread through her chest like fire, but it did not burn. And then she saw it. A vision. The vision. She was standing at the edge of Ubakot's village square, but it was different. The sky was dark, too dark. A storm raged above, thunder cracking like a whip. In the centre of the square stood a man, his face hidden in shadow, but she knew him. Baba Luku. He was bound, his hands tied behind his back. The people of Ubakot surrounded him, watching, some with fear, some with anger, some with confusion. Then Morẹ, níkẹ heard a voice. What will you do? She turned but saw no one. He wronged you, he wronged your mother, he nearly destroyed your life. The storm grew wilder, the wind howled. Will you hold on to your pain, or will you let me heal this land through you? She turned back to Baba Luku. For so long, she had dreamed of justice, of seeing him punished. But now, as he stood before her, powerless, something strange happened. She felt pity, a broken man, a defeated man. Your choice will shape the future of Obako. Then, darkness. She jolted awake. Her heart pounded. Her body was drenched in sweat. But she knew what she had to do. God had given her a choice. The past was knocking at her door, and she had to decide how to answer. February 13th, the unexpected arrival. Damila found her the next morning, sitting outside the hut, staring at the rising sun. "You didn't sleep," he said, sitting beside her. She shook her head. "I had a vision." Damilola's expression grew serious. "What did you see?" She hesitated, then told him everything. When she finished, he exhaled deeply. "That's a hard thing to ask of you, Morẹ, níkẹ." She nodded. "I know," but before they could say more, a voice interrupted them. "They are here!" Morẹ, níkẹ and Damilola turned to see a young boy running into the village. People began gathering, murmuring in confusion. Morẹ, níkẹ's stomach clenched. Something was wrong. Then she saw them. A group of men, dressed in ragged clothing, their faces worn with hardship, approached the village. And in the centre of them, Babaluku. Her breath caught. The man who had once ruled Obako with fear now looked like a shadow of himself. His once powerful frame was weak. His eyes were sunken, his steps unsure. But he was not alone. Behind him were his remaining followers, the men who had helped him oppress the village. The air grew thick with tension. Villagers whispered. Some stepped back in fear. Pa Ojos stepped forward, his voice stern. "Why have you come back?" Babaluku lifted his head slowly. His lips trembled as he spoke. "I have no home." Silence. Morẹ, níkẹ felt her pulse in her ears. Babaluku looked around at the people he had once terrorized. "I have lost everything. The gods I trusted have abandoned me. My body is failing. I have nowhere else to go." His voice broke. "Obako, forgive me." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The man who had brought them so much suffering, begging? A woman cried out, "Forgive you? After all you've done?" Another spat on the ground. "You deserve to rot in the forest." Anger spread like wildfire. The people wanted justice. They wanted revenge. Morẹ, níkẹ's vision flashed in her mind. "What will you—" Slowly, she stepped forward. All eyes turned to her. She could feel her own heartbeat pounding. Was she truly about to do this? She opened her mouth. And then a voice rang out. "Traitor!" Everyone turned. One of Babaluku's old followers, a man named Chegun, stepped forward, eyes burning with rage. "You think you can crawl back here and beg for forgiveness?" He spat. "You are weak, old man. I will not bow like you." Before anyone could react, he pulled out a dagger and ran straight toward Morẹ, níkẹ. Gasps and screams filled the air. But before the blade could touch her, a strong hand gripped Segun's wrist. Damilola. With one swift movement, he twisted Segun's arm, sending the dagger flying. Villagers rushed forward, grabbing Segun, restraining him. The air was thick with shock. Damilola turned to Morẹ, níkẹ, his hands trembling. "Are you okay?" She nodded, her breath uneven, but inside, something clicked into place. The past had indeed come for her, and she had just faced it. The next move was hers. Would she let bitterness win, or would she choose the impossible, forgiveness? Tomorrow was Valentine's Day, and by then she had to make the hardest choice of her life, one that would shape not only her future, but the future of Obako itself. Concluding chapter. The sun rose over Obako, casting golden hues over the village. But within the hearts of the people, a storm still raged. Morẹ, níkẹ stood in the village square, facing the man who had once ruled them with an iron fist. Babaluku was on his knees. His head bowed, his voice broken. "I have no home," he had said. "Forgive me." The people were divided. Some wanted him cast out forever. Others wanted justice. And Morẹ, níkẹ, she was torn. She remembered the pain, the suffering, the way he had made her mother cry, the way he had nearly taken everything from her. But she also remembered the vision. "What will you do?" Slowly, she turned to the crowd. Her voice, though soft, carried the weight of the moment. "We all stand before God in need of mercy." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "We have all sinned, but God does not cast us away. He calls us to repent and turn to him." She looked down at Babaluku. "You have done great evil," she said, her voice steady. "But if your repentance is true, then let God be the judge." A hush fell over the square. Pa Ojos stepped forward, stroking his beard. "And what do you propose we do with him?" Morẹ, níkẹ exhaled. "Let him work. Let him rebuild what he destroyed. If he truly seeks forgiveness, he will show it, not with words, but with actions." For a long moment, silence hung in the air. Then, a slow clap. Damilotla. Soon others joined in. One by one, the people nodded. Some reluctantly, some willingly. Justice had been served, but mercy had won. A new beginning. Days turned to weeks. Babaluku worked under the watchful eyes of the villagers, helping to rebuild the homes and lives he had shattered. Morẹ watched from a distance, her heart lighter than it had been in years. She had chosen to let go of her past, and in doing so she had set herself free. Damilotla walked up beside her. You did something incredible, Morẹ, she smiled. I did what God asked of me, he nodded. So what's next for you? She looked at the sky, the sun warm on her face. Whatever he has planned, a future with hope, a future led by grace, a future in God's hands. As you read this story, ask yourself, have you truly forgiven? Have you let go of the past? But most importantly, is your relationship with your Creator intact? Valentine's Day is not just about celebrating love with people. It is a time to reflect on the greatest love ever known, the love of Jesus Christ, who gave his life for you. No matter your past, no matter your pain, he is calling you today. Come to Jesus, give your life to him, surrender all at his feet, and he will make you new. Pray this simple prayer. Lord Jesus, I surrender my life to you. I confess that I am a sinner, and I ask for your forgiveness. Come into my heart. Be my Lord and Saviour. I choose to follow you from this day forward. Amen. If you prayed that prayer, congratulations. You have taken the most important step of your life. We invite you to join one of our services at the Redeemed Christian Church of God, Lagos Province 112, and grow in your faith. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring, faith-filled stories. May the love of Christ fill your heart today and always. This story is brought to you by the Redeemed Christian Church of God, Lagos Province 112 media team. It is a purely fictional composition and not based on any individual's life story.